Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. I'm sorry for the delay on my videos. I had to go to the hospital unexpectedly, and I've never been to the hospital so much as this year. I don't know what's going on, because I've never been really sick before, so hopefully all this nonsense is over with, and let's get back to Princess Alexandra. Well, Princess Alexandra had the saddest blow of all with the death of her mother, Queen Louise, on September of 1898. When she was called to Denmark, she had to leave her recently injured husband behind. In July, the prince had slipped and fractured his kneecap. The princess wrote to the Prince of York that she described the concourse of doctors and surgeons, and they say to themselves, "This kneecap we truly lay as they do with the foundation stone." Seldom or never did she complain of her own lameness, and there was a sentence in the same letter that shows she really suffered from her handicap. "I only hope to God he may not get a stiff leg like mine, which is, I confess, an awful bore and nuisance, and one's wrenched legs always in the way, and makes everything one would like to do so awkward, such as riding, running, and bicycling, etc. And stairs are always detestable, and before a lot of people it's odious." The princess was so exhausted by the strain and sadness of her mother's last illness that even the Prince of Wales, who was never an alarmist, expressed serious fears for her health. She was slow over the business of sorting Queen Louise's papers and possessions, exasperating the Duke of York, who remained with her in Denmark and was now fretting over the loss of his shooting. The Prince of Wales was growing impatient. "I must honestly tell you that your papa is very anxious that Mother dear should return home now," the Duchess of York wrote. "I do hope you may be able to persuade her to come soon." Although the prince never liked to be parted from his wife for very long, his anxiety over her in no way prevented him from amusing himself with other women. In 1895, Frances Brooks, now Countess of Warwick, suddenly and unexpectedly became converted to socialism. Whether for this reason or because the prince was becoming bored with her charms, the affair showed signs of cooling off. Society with a capital S mattered more to the Countess Warwick, even in her socialist phase. Now that the doors were no longer open to her as the prince's mistress, her social position would be extremely precarious if the princess were to continue to refuse to receive her. With this in mind, Lady Warwick wrote the prince a letter in which she declared that although she knew that unkind gossip had reached his wife's ears, yet she was convinced that the princess was too noble a character to listen to slander or to bear malice. This letter touched the prince so much that he showed it to his wife, which of course was exactly what Lady Warwick had intended that he should do. Displaying the wisdom of the serpent, the princess burst into tears, expressed her sorrow for Lady Warwick's sad plight, and declared her own certainty that out of our evil good would come. She even agreed to receive her defeated rival. She could now afford to be magnanimous, and the prince rode off at once to give the good news. "I know, my darling, that she will now meet you with pleasure, so that our position is, thank God, better now than it ever was, since we have been such friends. And do not despair, in time you and she may become quite good friends." The prince had a plan to bring about the friendship. "We must endeavor to get some object in common, some philanthropic one, which I mean will have a common interest to both." The princess, however, quietly put an end to this ingenious scheme. "In case you should hear from Lady Warwick asking you to become president of a charity of hers, refuse it." The Duke of York wrote his wife, "Mother dear has done so and wishes you to do the same." But although the princess was not prepared to see herself or any member of her family sitting on a charitable committee with her husband's ex-mistress, she nevertheless appeared to him to be all sweetness and forgiveness. "Certainly the princess had been an angel of goodness through all of this," he wrote to Lady Warwick, "but then she is a lady, and could never do anything that was mean or small." 7 weeks after this idyllic ending to his connection with Lady Warwick, and the Prince of Wales dined for the first time with Mr. and Mrs. George Keppel, a handsome young society couple. George Keppel, brother to Lord Albemarle, came of a family closely connected with the royal family by ties of service and friendship. His wife Alice was an attractive woman of 29, Between her and the prince, to use Sir Philip Magnus's tactful phrase, an understanding arose almost overnight. Discreet and intelligent, loyal, and in no way self-seeking, Alice Keppel was universally popular. Her family life was a happy one, and its happiness was not destroyed by her love affair with the prince. In appearance she was handsome rather than beautiful, with fine dark eyes, a full but well-proportioned figure, and surprisingly small hands and feet, of which she was very vain. Her voice was loud, suddenly descending to a whisper, then rising almost to a bellow when she wished to emphasize a point. Mrs. Keppel's many good qualities won her general acceptance. Sir Philip Magnus writes that she was invited to almost all the houses which the prince visited except Hatfield and Welbeck, and be it said, also Arundel, since the Duke of York set his face against her no less strongly than did the Duke of Portland and Lord Salisbury. Some of the feeling against Mrs. Keppel among these members of the older aristocracy was due to their affection and sympathy for the princess, whose attitude towards Mrs. Keppel is popularly believed to have been one of almost superhuman charity and forbearance. This view is not absolutely correct. At times she could rise to historic heights in her dealings with her husband's mistress, but there were also moments when she was less saintly. Prince and Princess attended the regatta week on board the royal yacht, an occasion to which they both looked forward eagerly. The prince because he enjoyed racing in his famous Britannia, the princess because it was the only time when she had her beloved son, the Duke of York, all to herself. The Duchess, being a shocking sailor, wisely stayed away. "How are things going on in general?" the Duchess wrote one Cowes week. "I mean, does peace reign, or have you a difficult time?" "Peace had reigned all the forenight, and there had been no rose of any kind," her husband replied, adding, "At last Mrs. K. arrives tomorrow, and stops here on the yacht, and I'm afraid that peace and quiet will not remain. What a pity Mrs. G.K. is again to be for." The Duchess commented, "How annoying Mamma must be." The princess didn't like Mrs. Keppel, but she was grateful to her for keeping the prince entertained, and therefore good-tempered, and banishing the specter of boredom which haunted him perpetually. A tiny anecdote illustrates her tolerant, faintly teasing attitude. One day she chanced to look out the window of Sandringham just as her husband and his mistress were returning from a drive in an open carriage. The princess herself never lost her graceful slimness, but Alice Keppel, her junior by 25 years, had already grown very stout, while the Prince of Wales had gained the disrespectful nickname of Tum Tum. The sight of these two plump persons sitting solemnly side by side was too much for her equanimity. Calling her lady-in-waiting to come and view the joke with her, she dissolved into fits of laughter. The princess was able to deal with the trials of family life, thanks to her family of grandchildren growing up in York Cottage. My blessed grandson David, afterwards King Edward VIII, was born in 1894, Prince Albert in 1895, Princess Mary in 1897, and Prince Henry in 1900. She had been one to spoil the children instead of disciplining them, and that was a positive virtue for a grandmother. The Duchess of York didn't care for such indulgence, but a sympathetic and sensible young woman, she had allowed the princess to have the children with her as much as she wished. Not so the Duchess of Fife. The differing attitudes of daughter-in-law and daughter did not pass unnoticed. "I was so glad to show Louis and Macduff just how you trust your precious children in my care, and how fondly I look after them," the princess wrote on the 13th of November, 1897. The year of 1897 was the year of Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. The princess had her own ideas as to how that anniversary should be celebrated. In a letter to the Lord Mayor of London, she suggested that a fund should be opened to provide a dinner for the poorest of the poor in the slums of London, enclosing, of course, a substantial donation of her own. This was typical of her, but so was her disregard of hard financial facts. So many appeals had recently come before the public that inevitably this particular one fared badly. The scheme might have broken down altogether had it not been for the generosity and the flair for self-advertisement displayed by the millionaire tea merchant Thomas Lipton, who wrote a check to cover the considerable deficit between the amount subscribed and the actual amount required. The princess was naturally grateful to him for coming to the rescue of her scheme. When he received a knighthood in the net honors list, it was rumored that it had been given to him at her request. For the princess herself, the Jubilee rejoicings were overshadowed by anxiety for her brother, the King of Greece. On the 17th of April, hostilities had broken out between Turkey and Greece. Neither side really wanted war. The Turks were urged on by Kaiser William II, while King George of Greece, as always, trusted the great powers to intervene before it was too late. The Turks, though, proved too strong for the Greeks, and disaster followed disaster, and the king sent frenzied telegrams to his sister, begging her to use her influence with the Queen and with the British government on behalf of Greece. She, of course, was powerless. Lord Carrington wrote 8 May that the Princess of Wales is in a terrible state of mind over the Greek business, but keeps herself in wonderful control. On the 17th of May, the Greeks were defeated at Demokos, and the road to Athens lay open to the Turkish army. Panic seized the city, where anti-monarchist feelings rose to dangerous heights. In the evening of that same day, the princess rushed to Windsor in a final attempt to enlist Queen Victoria's sympathy and help. The Princess of Wales came down last night in an awful stew about Greece, the Queen's lady-in-waiting, Marie Lallet, wrote to her husband, imploring the Queen to do something to stop the war and stay in the hand of the triumphant Turks. The Queen could do nothing, nor did she show much interest in the matter. We live for nothing but the Jubilee, and seem to ignore the doings of the world in general, Mrs. Mallet wrote on 14th of June, and we snored at the Greek question. Later in the year, the Prince and Princess paid a last visit to the Gladstones at Hawarden. Gladstone had always been grateful for the unbounded kindness for which we had always received from your Royal Highness, and not less to the beloved Princess of Wales, a kindness which had done something to compensate for the Queen's unfriendly attitude. When Gladstone died on the 19th of May, 1898, the Princess wrote a long letter to Mrs. Gladstone in which she described him as that great and good man whose name will go down in letters of gold to posterity as one of the most beautiful, upright, and disinterested characters that has ever adorned the pages of history. She herself attended his funeral service in Westminster Abbey, where the prince acted as the pallbearer regardless of the Queen's protest. A little crucifix, which had belonged first to Gladstone, then to his wife, hung always beside the princess's bed, treasured for the sake of these two old friends. So I will end the video here. The princess had a lot to deal with, and she did it with style and grace as always. She dealt with the death of her mother and the death of an old friend. She was worried about her brother, who was king of Greece, and we also learned how much she loved her grandchildren and spoiled them. The Duchess was wise enough to let her mother-in-law watch the children, which was more than her daughter let her do with her own children. Princess Alexandra realized that and was grateful. So I want to wish everyone a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.